the world's so loud and so busy that I think we forget to check in with ourselves. And that's, for me, what this trauma and yoga can do, is that it really just, it helps you to just tune into yourself.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 166 of the Strokecast. A yoga teacher finds new life after stroke by going deeper into yoga. This episode is sponsored by the fine folks at Modus Nova. To find out if Modus Nova can help you recover the use of a stroke-affected limb, visit strokecast.com/Modus Nova. In this episode, we have our first listener-submitted win of the week, and you'll get to hear from Shelley after our conversation with this week's guest, Anna Kerry. Anna was working in business operations for a pharmacy chain in the United Kingdom, making sure that the opticians were appropriately staffed every day to keep folks seeing well. But she wanted more, and she began to find that in yoga, and practiced yoga, and then began teaching yoga and understanding it at a deeper level. And then she had a stroke at age 35. In this episode, Anna talks about her journey to thrive after stroke, to understand yoga as more than just a TikTok influencer hobby, and to fall back on yoga as she builds her new post-stroke life. So now, let's meet Anna Kerry. Anna, thank you so much for joining us on the show this week.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be speaking to you.
Well, it's always fun, especially when I get to talk to survivors from around the world. What was your life like before your stroke?
I mean, pretty standard, really. I've got a full-time job, which I still have a full-time job. So I was working my full-time job. I lived with my husband. And just a regular standard life. Obviously, enjoy having a yoga practice, and I teach yoga part-time as well. When I did that before I had the stroke, I'd not long, I suppose about 6 months before I had the stroke, I qualified as a yoga teacher. So I was kind of just pootling along, really, just like teaching yoga part-time, doing my work, and just living a really standard life. Not really much to report, because I suppose obviously the past few years we've been in the middle of a pandemic. So we've just been hunkering down really the past couple of years, obviously because of the pandemic. And before that, it was just really just a nice life that I'd set up for myself. Me and my husband, we like to go on holidays and stuff. So, just really standard things. Nice little life that I'd created. And then obviously I had a stroke.
Right. What sort of work were you doing?
I'm still doing the same job, so I still work full time. So I work for Boots Opticians. Boots is basically like a pharmacist, like a really big chain. Mm-hmm. And I work for the opticians side of it. I'm a resource specialist, and I look at all of their clinic rotas and look at where we need any locums, so where there's any gaps in clinics and things like that. So I'm a bit of a planner, really. I plan things. I enjoy doing that because I like planning, and I'm quite organised and that sort of thing. So it kind of suits me down to the ground. It was just kind of doing that sort of job, and again, just really standard day-to-day life.
One of the things I have found is that the more people I talk to, there is no standard life, because everybody has built out this. Folks who built out a pleasant experience or who have an unpleasant experience. There's always something fascinating about the way people have chosen to build their lives. I think that's great. So you're working as sort of the planner, sort of the person who makes sure that those different opticians facilities in the pharmacists are able to be open on time and take care of people. It's all about the planning. It's all about the organization, and nothing throws planning or organization into the wind quite like suddenly having a stroke. So, I mean, what happened that day?
It was a really odd day. Again, I say the word standard. I woke up. I felt fine. Obviously because of the pandemic, I used to work in an office, but we've obviously been working from home. And so I got up about 6 o'clock. My husband gets up really early as well for his work, so we both start really early. So I was up at 6, went to the loo, felt fine, came back, and in the morning I always do a workout. So I like to have a workout in the morning. So I was just there getting like my workout gear on, putting my sports bra on over my head, and that's when I felt weird. So I was putting my sports bra on, probably too much information there, but I'm a sharer. And my left arm just felt really weird. And I thought, my head started to feel a bit weird. And I thought, oh, do you know what? I've just stood up too fast. That's all. Because sometimes when I stand up too fast, I get lightheaded. And I thought, and sometimes if I do it really fast, my limbs kind of go a bit weird and a bit heavy. So I was like, oh, it's just that, it's fine. But then I sat down on the edge of the bed and I was just like, no, this isn't right. And my head just felt so fuzzy. And luckily, my husband, bless him, he was literally about 5 minutes away from going to work. So thank God he was still there. He walked past the bedroom and I just said to him, I don't feel right. But everything that came out of my mouth was slurred, and it was a real struggle to speak. And I think when people think about the adverts that you see for like stroke and stuff, and where they say like slurred speech, I think people assume that it's something like, oh, like when you're drunk and, it's like that. And it really isn't, or it wasn't for me anyway. It was a real struggle to actually say the words. And yes, they came out slurred, but for me, the thing that I felt most was the struggle. And so my husband literally came running over to me and he like grabbed hold of me like on the bed, because our bed's quite high. So I think he thought I was going to fall off because I looked a bit one-sided to him. So he grabbed hold of me, took one look at my face. And obviously I assumed that he saw that the left side of my face was drooping. And he just called 999 straight away, so emergency services. And he said straight away, he was like, I think my wife's having a stroke. I was really aware of everything that was happening to me. And I was thinking, I'm having a stroke. I was thinking that myself, because I was like, I say luckily, luckily I had the symptoms that you would see on a TV advert. I presented as a very typical how someone that was having a stroke would look and would be. Like my left leg wouldn't move, my left arm wouldn't move, the left side of my face was drooped and I couldn't speak properly, my speech was slurred. So it was obvious to me what was happening. But I was also thinking, young people don't have strokes, because at that point I didn't know that young people had strokes. I just thought it was an old person's thing, which sounds awful, but I just thought because there isn't really anything. I suppose when you see the adverts on TV that we have OPO, it's always an old person that's on there. That's how they present it as, that it's just an old person thing. So yeah, I realised when my husband was saying it to the ambulance people as well, that we're obviously in a very serious situation. And so yeah, he was obviously asking me to do different things from what the ambulance people were saying, like, can you move here? Like, can you raise both arms in front? And obviously I could only raise one. And at that point, I really started to panic. I was really, really panicking. I don't know why, but for some reason, my brain was thinking that I can't move one side of my body. What if something happens to like my breathing? What if something happens there and I can't breathe? So I was really panicking. I don't know why I was thinking that, but I don't know. That's just what came into my head in a panic situation.
Your brain was panicking while your brain was literally dying.
Yes. That's the thing, isn't it? And I suppose when you say it like that, it's like, oh, it's okay to have a bit of a panic then.
We talk about so many survivors I've talked to who find themselves just getting in the car and then trying to drive to their destination. The brain is not exactly making optimal decisions or behaving in an optimal way while it's under attack like that.
Yes, definitely. I suppose it was something that I actually asked when I was being discharged from the hospital after we'd sorted everything. I did ask. I was like, "Is there something that, if it happened again, would I be more rational? Is there something going on in my brain that would make me less rational?" Because I was like, if I saw the same symptoms again, I'd think, oh, definitely, I know what to do. I know what's happening. So would I panic less? But then my doctor did say, she was like, it might not present itself in the same way though. And I was like, oh, okay. So it might not necessarily present with the same symptoms if I had another one, but luckily I haven't. But yeah, it's just, I suppose when you think about it, it is your brain basically dying. It really puts it into context, doesn't it? Because you just think, yeah, well, no wonder I was panicking and thinking about all these different things. Luckily, we didn't have to wait too long for the paramedics to arrive. They came pretty sharpish, and I can't fault them, really. Their philosophy to me was, let's treat for the worst, but hope for the best. We'll treat you as if it's a stroke. But I don't know if they were just trying to make me feel better, but they were like, oh, it could be a lot of other different things. You know, we don't know yet because of your age, which obviously is something that most people, young people hear. Because of your age, it's probably not a stroke. So, but they were great. They got me to hospital sharpish. And yeah, so then when I got to hospital, I had a CT scan, which I don't think it showed anything on the CT scan, because that was what I had when I first got admitted into hospital. And then a few hours later, I had to wait a bit longer to get an MRI scan. And suppose during that time when I was waiting, I was obviously at the hospital, got admitted onto the stroke ward. And even the doctors were just like, no, we think it's a migraine. And I'm like, oh, this is an extreme migraine. It is. But it kind of, I don't know if that gave me a really false sense of hope, because they were like, oh yeah, we think it's migraine. So I'm like, my speech has started to come back. So I'm like, okay, so I can phone some people. So because I said to my husband, don't tell my mum and dad. He had to stay at home because of COVID. He couldn't come to the hospital with me, which was the worst thing ever. So he had to stay at home, and I was like, don't phone my mum and dad. Don't worry them yet. We don't know what's happening. But while I was in hospital, my dad started to phone me, and I was like, oh my God, I thought my dad had a profound moment, where he could sense that his daughter was ill or something was wrong with her. But it turns out I just texted my dad instead of my husband, when my left arm, I was trying to do things with it. I was trying to make it move and do things, and it pressed my dad instead of my husband. And I sent him a rambling message about a scan that was spelled all incorrectly and everything. And so he was like, what's going on? After I got obviously admitted onto the stroke ward and I could talk properly, well, it's still a little bit slurred, but I could speak. I obviously did some phone calls to people, and to my mum, I was like, yeah, they think it's just a migraine, mum. So I was like, well, maybe it is that, And then later on in the day, that's when the doctor came to tell me that I'd had a stroke. I was just so shocked. So yeah, it just felt really surreal. And to be there on your own and to not have your husband or anyone with you, any family member with you, to take that information in on your own when it's happened to you, I just couldn't comprehend. I couldn't take it in. And I know I didn't take it in because I was still thinking, well, a stroke, because thinking that a stroke happens to all people, I always thought a stroke was just a bleed on your brain. I didn't know there was a different type of stroke with the ischemic strokes I had, the blood clots. So I was still thinking that was what a stroke was. So when she was telling me this information, the doctor, I just didn't take any of it in. And obviously, as soon as she told me, I just burst into tears because I was just like, and I've said this before to some of my friends. I'm like, it's all really nice. Like, the doctor was lovely. She was so nice. And, it's all well and good having like a pat on the arm from the doctor saying it's going to be okay. But it's just not a hug from someone that you love that you need at that time. And it's just like, it felt awful because I felt like I was having to do it on my own. So yeah, obviously I phoned my husband straight away and sobbed down the phone to my husband, and phoned my mum and my dad and tried to tell them while I was in between sobs. The day was just crazy. That thing, isn't it, where it's just like in a split second, your life just gets derailed.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly that happens. Now, did they get that MRI done promptly enough that they were able to then treat it with a TPA, a clot-busting medication, or a mechanical thrombectomy and try to remove the clot? Or at that point, was it just, well, nothing we can do except ride it out?
Yeah, that was it. Funnily enough, someone that I used to work with, literally like 9 months after me, had a stroke as well. And she had to go through the whole having the clot removed and everything. And so I wondered about it a lot. Like, I wonder why. And then when I asked, they were like, well, the damage has already been done. Obviously, once they'd realised that it wasn't a bleed, they just gave me aspirin to take. And obviously, for 2 weeks or so, I think I was on aspirin, and then I got moved over onto clopidogrel. But yeah, other than that, it was kind of just like, well, there's nowhere else for the clot to go. It's done its damage, basically. I suppose I was kind of left feeling a little bit confused because, again, obviously I know I didn't take in any information that they actually gave me at the time because there was just too much information to deal with. Because I've been so lucky. I know obviously having a stroke's not exactly the most luckiest thing in the world, but it was mild, and I've got the use of my arm, my leg, my speech back. To look at me now, you wouldn't know that I've had a stroke. So I think it was just hard for me to understand when they were like, so the damage has already been done to your brain. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean for me? It's just a hard thing it was hard for me to get my head around to start off with. And now I just kind of just think, well, like I live a healthy lifestyle, so I think that's probably gone in my favour. And just luck, really.
Sure. Well, I know it sounds a little weird to say it, but when you say I feel lucky, but that is something I hear from so many survivors I talk to that feel lucky about the way things turned out.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Like I've always said from the beginning, I'm not one of those people that says, why me? Why have I had a stroke? Because if not me, then who? I'm no more special than anyone else. That, these things happen in life. That's just how the cookie crumbles, isn't it? I don't know. It just feels like with some people, some of the people have just really suffered. And I do think on the flip side of that, I do sometimes think, well, why have I recovered so well? And I think through speaking to a counsellor, because I think everyone that has a stroke should speak to a counsellor or a therapist or something, because it's a lot to unpack. It's just sometimes that's just how life falls, isn't it? And it's just, you can't keep thinking, well, why has this happened? Or, why have I not recovered very well? Why have I recovered very well? Is all those things that you can just keep playing around in your mind, and it's just not good for you. So I just kind of think now I'm just like, okay, this is what's happened. Stick to the facts. This is it, and this is where I am now. So yeah, it's a wild ride to be on, though.
Absolutely. Did they know what caused your stroke?
Yes, I've got a PFO. I had my stroke in March 2021, and then I had my PFO diagnosed in the April, and I am still waiting for it to be closed. which is a nice long wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's, so while waiting for that to be closed, it's team clopidogrel to keep this from happening again, and just trying to engage in best practices.
Yes, definitely.
And a lot of that is the same, very similar to my experience. I was a wake up stroke. Woke up Saturday morning to use the bathroom, and my arm and my leg just sort of went offline. I did not have the sports bra experience. Fortunately, I understand that is its own realm of gymnastics and feats of strength to get into and out of one of those. So I have been fortunate in that respect. But and of course, as an oversharer, I think once we've been through this experience, it definitely changes the level of sharing that you become comfortable with after going through a hospital experience as well. So what was your favorite memory from your time in the hospital?
The food. It was so hard for me being in hospital. It was really hard for me to be away from my husband for the time that I was. It was just really difficult most of the time. And the only thing that I was really loving about it was that because like I said, I do a workout in the morning, I do have a healthy lifestyle, and I do try to eat healthy. So like usually if I'm at work or I'm working, it's literally my lunch is a salad. And that's because I like it, not because I'm forcing myself to eat that sort of food. It's because I do enjoy it.
That's the best reason.
Exactly. But literally, as soon as I saw the food menu, I was like, oh yeah, I'll have that apple crumble. Yes, I'll have that ice cream. So yeah, literally the food was probably my best memory of being in hospital. I was just like, do you know what? I've had a stroke. I don't care.
That's great. You know, it's like, hey, I'm at this point. You know what? I'm going to enjoy.
One of my favourite memories was probably having a shower. Just because I'd gone a few days because I was literally like, I'd got things hooked up to me, and I was just, and even one of the nurses, she came in after I'd had the shower, she's like, oh, you smell better. So yeah, it was just small things like that. I spent most of my time being on video calls to my husband, and then like checking in with like my mum, my dad, my brother. Luckily, again, I keep using that word luckily, my brother had a brain tumour removed like about 4 months before I had the stroke. So he was like really good to be able to talk to about all of this sort of stuff and everything that was happening in hospital and stuff. So,
and you get to have some of that sibling competition going.
Oh, do you know what? That is the funniest thing, actually. As soon as my brother phoned me when I was in the hospital, and I didn't even say hello to him, I was just like, I was so sick of you getting all the attention. I just wanted to do something. and that's when he knew that I was okay, because he just burst out laughing, and it was like, I thought that's what it was. So yeah, we've really put our family through the ringer past a few years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of this times. If you don't laugh, you cry.
Yes, definitely.
So you mentioned your experience due to COVID is you're alone there. Your husband is at home. You're connecting with him on video calls. I mean, how did this experience and everything you've been through here then impact your relationship with your husband?
It's to be honest, it's really made us a lot stronger. I know it could go either way with these sort of things, and I know obviously a lot of people's relationships have broken down because of this type of thing, and I can understand why. It's a lot for everyone to deal with. Yeah, it's really strengthened our relationship, to be honest. He's really helped me so much. I think that morning, we've talked about it a lot at length about everything that happened, and he's just like, I think for him, the worst part was, he said to me the other day, it was like seeing you, literally, you're just in that position. He was like, you're completely stripped bare and so vulnerable, and I can't really do much to help. And it was obviously for him to send me off in an ambulance at that point of either of us knowing we didn't know what was going to happen. Would that be the last time we'd see each other? Because things can go wrong. it's been really difficult, but it has made us stronger, definitely. I just think he was just amazing. He actually said the one thing to me when it was happening, the one thing that he knew would calm me down, and it comes around to my yoga. He was like, use your yoga breath. And in that moment, when he said that to me, it just like flicked a switch in my head. And I was like, yes, I can deal with this because I can use my yoga breath. I can do this. And he himself has been through a lot of anxiety. Like years before I met him, he had a bit of a breakdown and has suffered really bad with anxiety for a lot of years. And he still gets anxiety every now and again, but it's been good to be able to draw on his knowledge. I've never really suffered with anxiety, and to have him there to say, it's okay, this is what's happening, you're all right. You know, when I'm having, like, I remember not long after I come out of hospital, and we're just pottering around in my garden, you know, and I'd picked something, I think I'd picked a watering can up just to water some plants, and I don't know if I stood up funny or something just happened, and I started to have a panic attack because I thought something was wrong again. You know, that health anxiety that we all seem to get after having a stroke. And he was just there straight away, just like, it's all right, like, let's sit down. Like, took me into the house, sat me down. He was like, and just talking me through it. And yeah, he's been amazing, bless him. I know it's not been easy for him. It's so much harder for the person watching, I think, because you're kind of just in the midst of it, you know, and you just kind of like, okay, this is happening, and you just got to deal with it. But I suppose it's that person that loves you is seeing you in that vulnerable way that is hard for them. So yeah, it is very difficult for the loved one. Yeah.
You mentioned your yoga practice while you're going through this, and that helped. You had just started become a yoga teacher just a few months before the stroke, right in the middle of the pandemic. So, I mean, when did you first get into yoga?
I was mid-20s, I'd say. I started to just kind of dabble in some home videos.
So mid-20s, so that was about 10 years before your stroke.
10 years, yeah, it's about 10 years before stroke, yeah. So I just kind of started to do, and to be honest, I used it more for fitness, more of a real fast-paced yoga sessions that I used to do, and it was just some DVDs back in the day that I used to do. And
for our younger listeners, DVDs were these silver metal discs that you used to put into a thing on your TV to watch movies, and that Netflix used to send you in the mail.
Yes, let's not even go back to videotapes. We'll show our age there.
Just when you thought you were weirdly young and talking about stroke, now we're talking about VHS and DVDs.
Yeah, some categories we fall into young, some categories we fall into old. Yeah. I suppose when I got to my later 20s, I'd basically, from the age of 17 to about my late 20s, I'd always worked in retail, in shops. When I got to my late 20s, that's when I moved over to work in an office, and that's when I started to work for Boots. And the job I originally did was just really stressful. Yeah, really, really stressful, really fast-paced. Because I was now not working in retail, in shops, I now had weekends off. And I realised that there was a yoga class in the village that I live in on Saturday morning. So I thought, do you know what? I'll go to that. It'll be nice on Saturday after I've had a stressful week, just to wind down. And I can make sure that the videos, like DVDs that I've been watching, that I'm doing everything that I should be doing. And the postures that I'm doing them all right. And so, yeah, I started going to a class on a Saturday morning, which I loved. Yeah, it really made me feel nice and relaxed after my stressful week. Something just started in the back of my mind when I was doing the classes. I was like, I really like this, and I really would like to learn how to teach this, I think, because in all of my job roles that I've always done, I've always been someone that likes to train people. I've never been a specific trainer. I've just always been someone that's that has the patience to do that. And so I've always been asked by line managers and whatever to do training. So yeah, I just kind of started thinking that I wanted to teach. I don't know, I really like getting the best out of people. You know what I mean? Like when you're training someone and then you see them progress, and yeah, I really like that. So it's always been something that's been always been something that's present for me. And I suppose going into teaching yoga is just kind of a continuation of that. So when I first started thinking about teaching, it was kind of, I thought I needed to find somewhere to obviously learn. So I did a bit of Googling, because that's always where you get your answers from. So yeah, I found a school in Nottingham, and they did a foundation course, because at that point I was still thinking, well, it's just, yoga's these postures that you make on a mat and all these different shapes that you do with your body. That's what yoga is. I knew there was like some other bits to it and stuff like your breathing and that type of thing, but I always just, I didn't really know that much about it. So I was like, I felt like a foundation course would be beneficial so that I could learn more. In yoga, you'll probably hear people say about how many hours they've done. So everything works in hours. So I did a 60-hour foundation course, which then goes on to a 200-hour teacher training course. So 200 hours is I suppose the bare minimum that you need to do to be able to teach. So if you want to teach, you have to do it. So I did the 60-hour course first, which was just such an eye-opener for me, because that's when you really start to go into like the yoga philosophy. And I just learned so much more, and how much there is to yoga in that course. And it just cemented my love of yoga. And so, yeah, that really just spurred me on to do the 200-hour training. I had these thoughts of doing this teacher training for a good long time before I actually did anything about it. It was always just a secret thought in my head. I didn't even share it with my husband to start off with. And it wasn't until I expressed it to my husband and he was just like, well, why don't you? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point, actually. Why don't I just do this? Yeah, I'd had this thought in my head for a long time. And so then I was like, right, okay, yeah, I'm doing it. I've booked on. I'm all there. I'm going to start it. It's in 2019. It starts in October. Yeah, I'm on it. And then I get a few months into it and then the pandemic hits. And you're just like, really? So obviously that changed everything. And it was the first time that the school that I trained at, so the Here Yoga was where I trained. And there's such a fabulous school run by Jasminda. And it's literally just an amazing place to be. And they did so well for us. They just changed everything to online. It was hard, but actually, I do think the pandemic has given me something that I wouldn't have before, because I would never have learned to teach online. Not something that ever crossed my mind. It was always something that it was very much a studio based or like a village hall based or something like that. It's always in person that I was wanting to teach. Again, it's one of those things that you just think, I've been thinking of doing this for so long, and then the pandemic happens, and it's like, do I wish that the pandemic didn't happen? Obviously, yes, I would love that the pandemic didn't happen, and that would be great. But actually, I've got quite a lot out of it. I think sometimes you just got to make the best out of the situation. And I suppose that's like with stroke, isn't it? Make the best out of it.
So you've then progressed in your yoga practice from starting with just mimicking the movements you see on the DVDs on the TV, going into actually doing it in person, starting to learn more and more and diving into these hours and hours of lessons, tracking it the same way that pilots track their flying time in aircraft, and then converting over and getting more of this background, switching over to doing it online. I mean, how has your understanding of yoga as a thing changed in this over this time, or what does yoga mean to you today?
I think my understanding of it has changed dramatically. And I think a lot of people there's so many misconceptions around yoga that it's all these, I suppose, skinny white young ladies that are on magazines and on Instagram, and they're all in these really fancy postures, and like they've got their foot on their head. And I mean, I don't know why you'd want to put your foot on your head. Who knows?
I spent enough time trying to not put my foot in my mouth.
Yes. So yeah, there's so many misconceptions around. And I think I was one of those people back in the day when I was first thinking about yoga, and how it was is that it's that you need your body to look like this in this posture, and it's got to do this and it's just none of that at all. Like for me personally, and you know, since I've done my tool and shower training, I've gone on to do other training as well since then. It's just about what you feel. When you're on your mat, it's about what feels right for your body. I may be a teacher, but I'm only there to guide. I'm not there to tell someone how it should feel. I'm giving people the permission to go into their body. You know, I'm giving them that time. This hour, if you come to a class, this hour is for you to feel, to understand your body, to understand what is going on within. That's what our yoga practice is about. It's about self-exploration, looking within. And when I get on my mat, that's my space. My mat is I think of it as my sanctuary. It's seen a lot. It's seen tears. It's seen me angry. You know, it's seen me at peace with myself. It's seen an awful lot. But it's my space that is just for me to go to in times of need. And, you know, since having the stroke, geez, I've needed it. It's literally like, it's like my safe space. You know, I can go onto my mat, and even if I don't move my body, just sitting on it gives me comfort. It's just such a nice space for me. And that's what I try to get across to my students, is that when you're on your mat, it's just time for you. You know, it's about, I think there's so many things about self-care, and that people can think of self-care as being selfish, but self-care is a necessity. You know, it's one of those things, isn't it? You know, that saying where if you're on an aeroplane, they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help other people. Because if you're not looking after yourself, then there's no way you can look after other people, because your tank is empty. You know, and it's giving yourself that time and allowing yourself that time to just look within and just to feel, and to know that it's okay to feel crap sometimes, you know. Since having the stroke, it's just like, God, today's not a very good day, you know, and that's okay. It's not about your yoga practice. It will never take away stressful situations. It will never take away anything like that. It's all it will do is help you manage those situations better. And that's what your yoga practice is there for. So that's like when my husband said to me, use your yoga breath. That more than anything just flipped that switch in my head to say, yeah, I can actually deal with this. I don't need to panic. And it calmed, like using my yoga breathing, so just doing some deep inhalations and long exhalations, flipped my nervous system. So it's your nervous system that is flipped from the fight or flight mode to the rest and digest mode, so the sympathetic to the parasympathetic side. It's just allowing your body to settle. And that's what just is so simple with breathing. It's so simple, everybody does it, you know. And that's what is great about yoga, is that because my understanding has changed so much from, it's got to, you go onto your mat, you do the yoga postures, you look a certain way, you have to do it like this. And it's not like that at all. You know, it's whatever you want it to be is your yoga practice. There's so much that it has to offer.
When you're talking about these perceptions of yoga, I mean, it's fascinating from that perspective. Like I say, a lot of people come into it from it's the young fit white women on Instagram, which is yeah, a lot of people see that as yoga, but that is when you start talking about at its core that starts to unpack a whole bunch of things around racism and cultural appropriation and all those other challenges, erasing some of the cultural origins of yoga from the Indian subcontinent and the rich historical traditions there. And I think one of the challenges we actually have in the United States is that some of the evangelical conservative Christian movements have actually started to try to ban yoga practices in school, claiming that it is sinful and an entryway for the devil and whatnot, and undermines Christianity and all this.
Yeah, I do. I keep up to date with some of the things that are happening in America with yoga. And I just think it's so sad when they want to take it out of schools because it's such an amazing practice for young people to start at a young age. I wish I'd started at a younger age. I really do. I wish I'd have had it when I was at school, but obviously it wasn't really the done thing then to be teaching yoga in school. But yeah, I just think that there is so much out there about yoga and there's so much that gets missed, because there is so many other different forms of like movement practice and things like that. Yoga is so much more than just the movement practice. And I think that's what is missed, is that it's all about the movement and it's not at all. There's so many different things, which I do find it really sad that it's like that. Obviously, as a white yoga teacher myself, I'm always trying to make sure that I'm learning, making sure that I'm not disrespecting any of the traditions of yoga. So it's a constant learning. Having a yoga practice anyway is a constant learning, and being a yoga teacher, you probably won't expect me to say that the good thing about yoga is that it's accessible. Because it doesn't come across as accessible, but it is. So what makes it accessible is the fact that it's not all about the movements. If you can't move, you can still breathe. You can come back to your breath. You can meditate. There's lots of other things that you can do with your yoga practice other than just movement on a mat. If you don't want to go on the mat, you can do it in a chair. This is something that you can use and for it to be accessible to people that have limited mobility. So you can have people in a chair doing yoga postures. You can have them just breathing. You could have them reciting a mantra, and that helps your mind. A mantra description of it is it's mind tool. So manas means mind and tra means tool. So together it's basically a mind tool. So that helps to calm and focus your mind. So there's so many different things that you can do with a yoga practice that makes it accessible. And so it's not just about the movements. That's, for me, what I think is the best thing about yoga. I suppose especially coming at it from stroke survivor, because when I was in hospital, when I was getting wheeled down to having my CT scan, the thing that was going through my head even then was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to teach yoga anymore because I can't move. And then I was thinking, well, I'm going to need to have to find something else to do here with it. And that's when I started looking, after I come out of hospital, that's when I started looking at all of the different things to do with trauma and accessibility and looking more in depth into what practices and tools you can use. So that there's so many different tools that you can use in yoga to help you through a recovery, because as we know, it's not all about the body, it's about the mind as well. And so there's just so many different tools that it offers, and that's what makes it different for me.
So one of the things about your practice is that you talk a lot about the connection between yoga and trauma. Could you explore that a little bit?
When I came out of hospital, I found it really difficult to sit in stillness, to meditate. I found it really difficult because it was just too difficult to sit with those emotions and those feelings. And so I spoke to a yoga teacher that had done a trauma-informed yoga training. And he was saying, don't necessarily sit in stillness. You might want to move your body. You're at a point where you probably can't trust your body because of what's happened, which is exactly what I was feeling, that I couldn't trust myself. And so I, just kind of thought, okay, well, I need to start moving my body again. So I started gently moving. Once I found my rhythm a little bit with movement, and I thought, do you know what? Yeah, I feel a little bit stronger in myself now, that I could start to explore the trauma side of what's happened. There was literally just this thing on Facebook that I saw. I'm in a yoga teacher group on Facebook, and someone had put in there that they were doing a little training on trauma. So I was like, I'll listen to that. But I listened, and I was just like, oh my gosh, to think of it in this way. So when we're thinking about trauma and how it affects your nervous system, so obviously you're in the fight or flight mode, which is your sympathetic nervous system kicking in. That's obviously from when we were like hunter-gatherers and there's a tiger chasing us, and we get all those stress hormones coming into the body, and it really heightens everything. And that's obviously what we feel, when we're having a stroke, if we're in a real panic after we're having a stroke, and most people suffer with health anxiety. That's your nervous system kicking in. With yoga, you can directly impact your nervous system. So you can switch it from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest state. And that's just through your breath. So by doing the long inhalations and exhalations, you're calming your nervous system down. And that's what I find really interesting. Your nervous system is dysregulated. So when you're in fight or flight mode, you're at one end of a scale and you're dysregulated. So you're at the sympathetic side, the fight or flight side. And actually think of it as a sliding scale. And obviously regulated is on the other side of that scale. So think of it as, what can I do? What can I offer myself in this moment to just nudge that scale slightly back towards regulated, to the parasympathetic side? So that rest and digest. What can I offer myself in this moment? And even if it's just placing a hand on your heart, or one hand on the belly, one hand on the heart, taking a few deep breaths, it can really help to flip that switch and just to nudge that scale back to being regulated. And that, for me, was a game changer for anxiety, and for helping me to think of it in a way that I was like, okay, it's something that I see it like in my head. It's like a visual thing in my head now. I see this scale and I just think, okay, what can I do? What do I need? And it's just asking yourself those questions. It's like, how do I feel? Okay, if I sit and take a deep breath, maybe I feel a little bit like I've got tight knots in my stomach. Maybe my chest feels a little bit tight. That comes across as being anxious. So that's how I feel. And then it's like, what can I, what do I need? What can I do for myself in that moment? And that's what a yoga practice can do for you, is that it helps you to tune into your body, to listen to what's happening, because the world's so loud and so busy that I think we forget to check in with ourselves. And that's, for me, what this trauma and yoga can do, is that it really just, it helps you to just tune into yourself.
Lots of interesting things coming out of that discussion. I think one of the things that jumped out at me was when you mentioned a lot of it's about checking in with yourself. When you start talking about, sort of that tension in the stomach or that heart racing that we associate with panic and anxiety. One of the things I've talked about in my other podcast back in the day, all about public speaking, is that excitement and anxiety often have very similar physical responses, and whether you label that as I'm nervous and I'm anxious, or whether you choose to label that as I'm excited and pumped, it can really make a difference in what you do from there.
Yeah, it's funny that someone years and years ago, someone said that to me. I think I was going for a job interview and I was saying that I was nervous, and they said exactly the same thing. Nerves and excitement are the same feeling. It's just how you interpret them.
So what is thichos?
The word means divine in Greek. So there's a concept in yoga, which is Atman and Brahman. So Atman is your inner self, so your true self, beneath all the layers that we give ourselves. So beneath your name, your job, everything, once you peel away all the layers of an onion and you get to your true self, that is Atman. And then there's Brahman, which is the universal consciousness, whatever that may be, whether you're religious and you believe in God or, whatever. So there's the universal consciousness, and then there's the inner consciousness and the inner divine self. And it means just basically that there is that divine self within us. And I think that is obviously one of the concepts from the philosophy side of yoga. That it's something that just really resonated with me, because for me personally, I have always struggled in my younger years with body image and things like that. I think for females, I know obviously for males it is hard as well, but for females it does seem particularly hard with everything that gets plastered all over everywhere about looking a certain way. So I've always had a bit of an issue there. And I just think having that divine self within, so that your true self, coming back to that, it just makes me think I am okay, I am okay as I am. Like, why am I hating on myself? That there is, there's something within me and within all of us that makes us, I don't know, it feels just like it's that you shouldn't be hating on yourself, because there is this part of you that's in there that is your true self and that you should come back to. And I suppose it's another one of the things that I always say is when you're having a crappy day, or you've got, your feelings and emotions are getting the better of you, your true self and your inner self is like the sky, and your thoughts and feelings are like the weather. They come and go, but your true self remains. And so that's something that I always seem to come back to whenever I'm having a bad day, or, if my feelings and emotions are getting the better of me, I'm always like, no, draw myself back to that, draw myself back to my inner self.
So it's about coming back to those core principles and that core pure identity.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
And that brings us to our hack of the week. But first, let's talk about sponsor Modus Nova. A while back, survivor Marsha Moran observed that no one is responsible for our recovery besides us. We choose whether or not to do our exercises, and whether or not to do our therapy, and whether or not to do our repetitions. Modus Nova makes it an easier choice for us by incorporating video games into our exercise regimens. The Modus Hand is an AI-controlled, air-powered robotic exoskeleton that I can wear on my affected side. It assists or resists me as I do my exercises, and those exercises are, of course, video games. It's a great and fun way to get in the thousands of repetitions that I need to drive stroke recovery. To find out if Modus Nova can help you recover the use of a stroke-affected limb, visit strokecast.com/Modus Nova. Use promo code STROKECAST for 10% off your first month. And now back to our hack of the week.
Take time to check in with yourself. So I make this non-negotiable now. I take 5 to 10 minutes throughout my day. If I need it more than once, then I need it more than once. I take the time to just ground my feet, take a breath, feel my breath, and for me, it's a comforting thing. I place a hand on my chest, on my heart, and I just feel like, how do I feel and what do I need in this moment? And I think doing this practice every day, it makes you aware, which is what we're always wanting to be, is aware of how we're feeling. And just, I think taking a breath, like deep inhalation and deep exhalation, and just taking that time to check in with yourself is massively important. It's such a big thing in my own practice and throughout my day, to make sure that, if I'm having a stressful time, because, job's stressful at times, it's just taking a step back from that. So I would say definitely take time to check in with yourself and don't shy away from the feelings that are there. It's about, sometimes it is too difficult to feel. Sometimes you do need to put things on hold because it does get too difficult at times. And I would say in times like that, then definitely try reaching out to a specialist, to speak to like a therapist or something like that. But for a lot of us, it's okay to feel the emotions that we feel. So it's not about pushing them away. So if you feel angry, recognize that and acknowledge it. If you feel anxious, recognize and acknowledge. I do a focusing practice, which is, again, to do with just taking the time to check in. So you take that time to check in with yourself and then notice what you're feeling. And then once you've acknowledged, say I feel anxious, I'll acknowledge that I feel anxious. And I usually tend to talk to the anxiety like it's a small child, because if you've got a small child, which I don't, but when you have small children, they tend to, if they're having a tantrum, it's because they want attention, they want something. And so when you ignore it, they get louder. And that's the same with anxiety. So if you push it down, it's only going to shout louder at you. And so that's why you acknowledge, say hello to it, be curious. So be curious about what you're feeling. And I think for me, that's been a real game changer, to be able to just talk to the anxiety and say, yes, it's okay. I know that you're there. I feel you. And to offer myself compassion and kindness, to say, actually, I've been through a lot. That's okay. It's all right to feel like that. And it helps to give you space from those feelings. It really allows that space to open up within you so that you can just breathe a little easier. That, I suppose that would be my tips, would be to check in with yourself and to acknowledge the feelings and the emotions, and that it's okay to have those feelings and emotions.
Well, Anna, that is so important, and that is fantastic. If folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
My social handle for Instagram is thichos yoga. So it's THEIKOS yoga. And there's my website, which is www.thichosyoga.com. So again, THEIKOS and yoga.com. You can find things on there all about me and my stroke and other things I've been doing. I'm in the process of launching the Life After Stroke program, which is a 6-week pre-recorded program, so self-paced, that is specifically for stroke survivors. The tools and things that I teach in this program are all of the tools that have helped me through my recovery.
I will have all of those links available over in the show notes. So folks can go ahead, check the show notes in your app, or head on over to strokecast.com and you can check out all of those links to learn more about Anna's work, and to check out Anna's program for stroke survivors. So Anna, thank you so much for joining us on the show this week.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely to speak to you, Bill.
One of the most compelling aspects of Anna's story for me is the almost sacred nature of her yoga mat. It's a piece of material, sure, but it's also a portal to another place, a place that she can experience all of her emotions, a place where she can go back and center herself, no matter what else happens. Her yoga mat can be a constant in life through stroke, through victories, through losses, and through it all, she has a constant place she can go back to. And when life calls for a change in geography, she can just roll up her special place and take it with her. Finding a place to center yourself and build your life around is a powerful win. And speaking of wins, the win of the week is a new feature on Strokecast. I want to hear about your win. Maybe it's big or maybe it's small, but celebrating the wins can give us the energy to recover further in the future and make our lives better today. So join me in celebrating Shelley's win.
Hi, I just found your podcast. My name is Shelley, and I had a stroke 4 months ago. I was at the hospital for 2 weeks of acute rehab, came home in a wheelchair, but I've been working really hard, and this week I did my farthest walk, 4.2 miles. Things are still not 100% for sure. My arm isn't working that well. Can't feel in the arm, but the leg, I've just been walking so much that I think things have improved. The more I've done, the more I think things improve. I didn't understand that when I first had the stroke. In physical therapy, when they would say that I could learn to walk without feeling. But as I've done it, and now people can't always tell that I had a stroke when I walk. So that's been exciting for me. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
That's awesome, Shelley, and thank you so much for sharing that with the community and letting us all be a part of your recovery. Do you have a win you'd like to celebrate? Go ahead and send it to me, and I'll include it in a future episode of the show. You can email me an audio recording at bill@strokecast.com, or you can just call 321-5-STROKE. That's 321-5-STROKE. 321-578-7653. And leave a voicemail anytime, day or night. Tell me who you are, a little bit about your stroke, and your win, and I may include it in a future episode. To learn more about Anna's journey, her Life After Stroke program for recovery, and thichos yoga, check out the links in the show notes in the app you're listening on or at strokecast.com/Anna. Share this episode with someone you know by giving them the link strokecast.com/Anna. Send in your win of the week by emailing an audio message to bill@strokecast.com or just calling 321-5-STROKE. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you soon.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.